Ladies and gentlemen, in a world constantly shaken by distractions, temptations, chaos, and emotional turbulence, there is a silent discipline that has stood the test of time, code of thought that formed the backbone of the greatest minds in history. That code is Stoicism, a philosophy not just of resilience, but of mastery, not merely of survival, but of sovereignty over self. And at the heart of Stoicism lies the rare and radiant jewel called self-control. The first Stoic secret is to control the story you tell yourself. At first glance, this might seem simplistic, but it is one of the most profound shifts in human psychology. Events in life are not inherently good or bad. It is our interpretation that gives them color. A broken promise, a delayed flight, a harsh word from a stranger. These are neutral events until the mind gives them meaning. The Stoics understood that it's not external circumstances that disturb us, but our internal judgment. Marcus Aurelius, a man who ruled an empire yet faced personal loss, betrayal, and war, reminded himself daily that perception is the root of suffering. When we learn to reinterpret events through the lens of rational thought rather than emotional reaction, we reclaim our inner power. Imagine waking up late for an important meeting. The common response would be panic, stress, frustration. But a Stoic would pause and assess the situation without judgment. Yes, the event occurred. Yes, consequences may follow. But how you frame it determines your state of mind. You can see it as a catastrophe or as a test of composure. You can label it a disaster or a moment to practice calm under pressure. The event itself is not in your control. The story you tell about it is. Self-control begins in that instant. When you take charge of your narrative, you prevent your emotions from becoming your master. This is not to say that emotions are wrong or that one should be cold and unfeeling. On the contrary, Stoicism acknowledges emotion but refuses to let it dominate. The Stoic trains his mind to separate the raw data of life from the interpretations imposed by habit, fear, or ego. This separation is a form of liberation. It frees you to act with clarity instead of reaction. You are no longer a puppet of your environment, but the author of your response. The power of controlling the narrative extends beyond isolated incidents. It becomes a way of life. If someone criticizes you, instead of taking it personally, ask yourself, is it true? If it is, you've been given a gift, an opportunity to improve. If it isn't, why should you be disturbed by a falsehood? In both cases, you maintain your equanimity. If you fail at something, you can either see it as a reason to quit or a stepping stone to growth. The story you choose becomes the foundation of your reality. This practice also involves vigilance. The Stoic must guard the gates of his mind. Negative interpretations often sneak in without notice. A look from someone becomes an insult. A delay becomes an injustice. A challenge becomes a burden, but the disciplined mind questions these assumptions. Is that look truly contempt, or am I projecting my insecurity? Is the delay unfair or simply inconvenient? Is the challenge a curse or a forge for strength? By constantly interrogating your inner dialogue, you refine your perception and purify your response. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If you think in terms of victimhood, you become one. If you think in terms of power and responsibility, you rise to meet them. This is not motivational fluff, it's cognitive discipline. The Stoic understands that reality is shaped first in the mind. The lens you use determines what you see. Change the lens and the world changes with it. Controlling the narrative also applies to identity. Many people are imprisoned by labels they've adopted unconsciously. I'm bad at discipline. I always procrastinate. I can't change. These are stories, not truth. The Stoic rewrites the script. Instead of being chained to past patterns, he focuses on present choices. Each day, he decides anew who he will be, guided not by past failures, but by current principles. This is radical freedom. Not freedom from external conditions, but freedom to define yourself internally. In practical terms, the Stoic develops this habit through regular reflection. In the morning, he prepares his mind for what might happen, reminding himself that people may be rude, things may go wrong, and plans may shift. By rehearsing adversity mentally, he softens its sting when it arrives. Then at night, he reviews the day. Where did I lose control of the story? Where did I assume the worst? Where did I let false narratives dictate my mood? This continual training sharpens the mind like a sword. Controlling the narrative also includes a focus on language. The Stoic is careful with the words he uses, even in his thoughts. He does not exaggerate misfortunes or dramatize inconvenience. He calls things by their true name. A failed deal is not a disaster. It is a delay. A betrayal is not the end. It is a revelation. A setback is not doom. It is redirection. This clarity of language cultivates clarity of thought, and clarity of thought strengthens self-control. This practice over time builds resilience. When the world throws you into the fire, your narrative becomes your shield. You do not panic because you've trained your mind to see clearly. You do not collapse because you've trained your soul to endure. You do not lash out because you've trained your tongue to speak with intention. This is what separates the Stoic from the reactive man. One is a prisoner of emotion. The other is a master of self. There's also a social dimension to this secret. When others wrong us, the instinct is to blame, to retaliate, to stew in resentment. But the Stoic reclaims that energy. He reminds himself that others act according to their own perceptions, their own stories, their own wound. Why should your peace be disturbed by their confusion? You cannot control their behavior, but you can control your interpretation. You can choose to forgive, to understand, or simply to let go. Not because it's easy, but because your serenity is worth more than being right. Even in success, the Stoic remains grounded through this principle. He does not let praise inflate the ego or achievement breed arrogance. He tells himself the truth, that success is fleeting, that fortune is fickle, that all glory fades. This humility protects him from the self-destruction that comes from pride. The same power that resists despair also resists delusion. Control the narrative, and you control the highs and the lows alike. This is not an overnight transformation. It is a lifetime discipline. Every day brings new challenges, new narratives, and new opportunities to practice. But every effort strengthens the mind. Every reframed thought becomes a building block of character. Every resisted impulse becomes a triumph of reason. This is the quiet, invisible work of the Stoic. No applause, no recognition. Just inner mastery, one thought at a time. Comfort is seductive. It whispers to us, promising ease, pleasure, and escape from effort. Yet, comfort is a cunning deceiver. The Stoics knew that indulging in comfort too often weakens the will, dulls the mind, and fosters dependence. That is why one of the great Stoic secrets to mastering self-control lies in the deliberate embrace of discomfort. Voluntary discomfort is not punishment. It is training. It is preparation for the inevitable trials of life. By choosing discomfort in times of ease, we prepare ourselves for discomfort in times of difficulty. We become less reactive, less fragile, and more in control of ourselves. Marcus Aurelius, though he lived in a palace, chose to live simply. He stripped away luxuries so that his soul would not become attached to them. He wore plain clothes, ate simple meals, and endured hardships without complaint. He did not do this to impress others or out of guilt. He did it to remain free. The Stoic sees comfort not as evil, but as dangerous when unexamined. It becomes a silent addiction that takes hold slowly until the mind can no longer bear discomfort of any kind. And when discomfort inevitably arrives, as it always does in life, the untrained mind collapses. The Stoic avoids this by inviting small difficulties into his daily life. Seneca, another great Stoic, once advised his readers to set aside a certain number of days, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, "Is this the condition that I feared?" This is not masochism. It is a psychological test. It reveals how little we truly need to function. It removes fear of poverty, loss, or lack. By exposing ourselves voluntarily to what we dread, we break its hold over us. What we once feared becomes familiar. What once controlled us loses its power. In this way, self-control is forged in adversity chosen with intention. Voluntary discomfort can take many forms. Fasting is one example. In depriving the body of food for a time, we gain mastery over desire. Hunger becomes a teacher. It shows us how strong we are. It reveals how often we eat not from need, but from habit or emotion. A person who can go without food for a day, without complaint, learns that he is not a slave to appetite. Cold showers, walking instead of driving, sleeping on the floor, refraining from entertainment, waking up earlier than need. Each of these is a form of controlled hardship that strengthens the will. It creates distance between impulse and action. The Stoic uses voluntary discomfort to shift identity. He no longer sees himself as fragile or dependent. He sees himself as capable of withstanding discomfort without losing dignity or discipline. This redefinition is transformative. It does not mean abandoning all pleasure, but rather detaching from the need for pleasure. It means reclaiming the ability to function with clarity in the absence of comfort. This is true power, not the power to control others, but the power to control oneself in the presence of pain or lack when others panic because their routines are disturbed. The Stoic remains calm because he has rehearsed such moments. When others collapse under the weight of unexpected hardship, the Stoic endures because he has practiced endurance. Voluntary discomfort is his training ground. The world cannot easily shake the soul that has already been through fire by its own choice. And when life brings real fire, the Stoic is not unprepared. He meets it with calm, not because he is fearless, but because he is familiar with the sensation of struggle. There is a psychological advantage in choosing discomfort. When you opt into it, you create a sense of control over your circumstances. It is no longer something happening *to you, but something you have chosen. This mind, that shift transforms suffering into strength. It reframes difficulty as growth. In this way, discomfort becomes an ally, not an enemy. The Stoic walks toward difficulty when others flee, because he knows that every moment of resistance builds a stronger will. Discomfort is also a test of value. What are you willing to suffer for? What principles are you willing to uphold even when it costs you ease? The Stoic uses discomfort to clarify what matters most. If a man cannot stand a little cold, how can he stand for truth under pressure? If he cannot bear a missed meal, how can he bear injustice with dignity? Discomfort is not just physical, it is moral. It reveals our inner hierarchy. It asks us, do you want to be comfortable or do you want to be free? The Stoic always chooses freedom. Training the body also trains the mind. When you walk instead of ride, when you carry your own burdens, when you push your limits physically, you are also telling your mind that it does not run the show. The body learns discipline through repetition. The mind learns it through challenge. Voluntary discomfort unites both. It is a whole being practice. You are not just building muscles or resistance. You are building a character that does not flinch when tested. It is important to remember that the purpose of discomfort is not to suffer pointlessly, but to grow consciously. The Stoic does not seek pain. He seeks strength. He does not romanticize suffering. He respects its capacity to refine. In this way, voluntary discomfort becomes a sacred practice. It is not loud or heroic. It is quiet, deliberate, and often invisible. But it produces the kind of person who can be trusted in crisis, who does not fall apart under pressure, who does not need constant pleasure to stay functional. There is also a spiritual aspect to this practice. When you give up something you enjoy, food, comfort, luxury, you learn gratitude for its presence and acceptance of its absence. You stop demanding constant stimulation and start appreciating what is. You develop detachment, not in the sense of coldness, but in the sense of balance. The Stoic learns to say, I enjoy this, but I do not need it. I can let it go if I must. That is the root of serenity, a want without clinging, to enjoy without dependence. Modern life offers constant comfort. Everything is optimized for ease, but this has made many weak, anxious, and entitled. The Stoic stands against this tide. He does not reject technology or progress, but he refuses to be ruled by it. He chooses discomfort when necessary to maintain inner sovereignty. He fasts when others feast, wakes early when others sleep in, endures when others escape. Not because he must, but because he may. It is a declaration of autonomy. Every act of chosen discomfort rewires the mind. It tells the brain that pain is not the end, that effort is not to be feared, that craving is not a command. It reclaims agency from the automatic. It establishes a gap between stimulus and response. And in that gap lies freedom. The more you practice, the more that gap widens. The more it widens, the more control you gain, until one day you realize that nothing outside you determines your peace. The Stoic is not superhuman. He feels the cold, he feels the hunger, he feels the pull of comfort like everyone else. But he trains himself not to obey every urge. He trains himself to choose what is right over what is easy. And in doing so, he builds the kind of soul that can weather any storm. Not because storms are pleasant, but because the Stoic has already practiced standing still in the wind. There are two spheres in life: the things we can control and the things we cannot. This distinction is the core of Stoic philosophy and the foundation of unshakable self-control. The Stoic does not waste his energy on what lies outside his influence. Instead, he pours his effort into mastering what is his alone: his thoughts, his choices, his actions, his responses. This division between the external and the internal is what liberates the Stoic from frustration, anger, and despair. When you accept what you cannot change and take full ownership of what you can, you become immovable in a world that constantly shifts. Epictetus, a former slave-turned-philosopher, taught that while we may not control the events of life, we always control our attitude toward them. This is the dichotomy of control. It is not passivity but power. It is not surrender but strategic acceptance. The rain falls, the markets crash, people leave, accidents happen. These are not within your command. But how you interpret them, how you respond, what meaning you assign, that is where your authority lies. The Stoic sharpens his attention to this truth and lives from the inside out, never the outside in self. Role is impossible without clarity on what belongs to you. If you believe you can control the opinions of others, you will be anxious. If you try to manipulate every outcome, you will be exhausted. If you seek to eliminate all discomfort or chaos from the world, you will be endlessly frustrated. But if you focus instead on your own discipline, your own words, your own values, your own decisions, then you will stand firm while others collapse. The more you internalize this dichotomy, the less reactive you become. Life will continue to throw its weight around, but you will not be moved by every blow. The modern world pulls us constantly toward external validation. We are trained to care about likes, status, approval, appearance. But none of these are within our control. The Stoic trains himself to turn inward. Am I living according to virtue? Am I acting with integrity? Am I using reason instead of impulse? These are the true measures of a life well lived. When the inner scorecard matters more than the outer, you free yourself from the tyranny of opinion. You no longer dance for applause or shrink from criticism. You become your own guide.